Hello and welcome to Brave Tarot. Today I have a really specific message for a specific person. So this message is for you if you feel very confident in what you do and in who you are and in your vision for your life and your purpose when you're on your own. But then in certain circumstances, maybe circumstances that don't have a clear through line, you suddenly lose your grounding and you revert to a child, or you become what the other person wants you to be, or you emanate uncertainty and you end up leaving that dynamic and completely beating yourself up for it. Today I have a message to help you, not only prevent that from happening, but understand the process that's underneath that, and less why it's happening, because that's not really important, because we want to get this trait under control as quickly as possible. Like, the reason why you're here is because this is bothering you and because it's not who you really are. And so this reading is going to supply you with some consolidating factors in how you can prevent this from continually happening, and how you can finally have this version of you that you really are be the same version of you that comes out wherever you go. So first of all, I'll just share with you the image I'm seeing. I'm seeing somebody cultivating an artifact, or creating a little item that is made of gold. And as soon as other people look at the item starts to float and diffuse and spread out, and it loses its form. And what I'm seeing this reading is going to do, it's like a piece of gold wire that's going to wrap around the item so that it stays strong and holds together. Now, there's 4 different steps that Spirit is pointing out to me here. So let's go into the meat of the reading. Number 1, the first thing you need to understand is that tests are going to be a part of your existence no matter what. So it may be, I'm getting the sense that this self-consolidating experience, it's almost part of your life purpose or your tikkun. And so you can't bypass that by being perfect. It's kind of it's like the problem you're experiencing needs to solve itself by happening, and the sense that you so badly want to present as perfect and not have this disastrous mess seen by the outside world, it's the same force that is generating the incoherent behavior. So the first thing is accepting that imperfection is present, and accepting that these tests are going to appear along the journey, as much as you fucking hate that and you don't want that to be what gets presented, and you regret it so much when it happens. There's also the inevitable fact that it does happen, and it happens out of the blue. It's not something you can prepare for. And so the most important thing is getting back up, dusting yourself off, and not looking back and beating yourself up for these experiences, because they're there to be had. They're like a grind, I'm seeing like a cheese grater. It's there to grind away at this problem, and you can't possibly tackle the issue unless you're faced with real world convergence with other energies. You just can't, no matter how many affirmations or how much self-building you produce on the way out into the real world. As soon as you hit the real world, you are going to hit these people who activate these innate, like, prehistoric patterns in you that connect you to your deepest insecurities and your upbringing and your childhood and everything like that. So the first step is to forgive yourself and stop beating yourself up for this inevitable testing. Step 2, Spirit is labeling as boundaries. This is the work that you do in private where you decide who you are and you make a clear decision about who you believe you best interact with and the circumstances that supply you with the greatest foundation to be who you are. This is looking into the friendships you currently have and noticing which ones have the least friction, which kinds of people allow you to be yourself without having to double guess. What are the circumstances that it requires for you to show up your best? Do you need to understand what the rules of the game are before you play it? Do you need to ask your boss for extra information before you engage in a job? Do you need to be honest with yourself about where you're trying to fit in but you don't really? An example of this would be, I host a podcast and I recently interviewed somebody who I wouldn't usually interview. And I know that at this stage in my process with the podcast, it's about collaboration and bringing friends in and people who want to build an episode with me. But I found a person that I thought was really fascinating. And so I asked them for an interview, but they only had 45 minutes and they had never heard my podcast before. Since it was the first time I'd ever done something like this, I let those two things slide. However, if I was in my true signal and my true instinct and purpose, I would have said, we can't achieve a successful interview in under 45 minutes. And so in hindsight, I was able to reflect on what kind of guests I really want to have on and how am I going to filter out a guest to make sure that they're the right fit for my podcast. And that can prevent those kinds of situations from happening in the future. So that's the second part, and that's the part you do in private. That's where you delineate who you are, and you have to come into the real world and set those boundaries and prerequisites with people. Even though it's scary, you'll get better at that, and that is the number one preventative move for being out of your element or being seen in a way that you didn't anticipate or want. The third step that Spirit is showing me is similar, but it's more about the implementation experience of those boundaries. So you're going to have to generate a feeling. It might make you feel like you're a cold person or a mean person, especially when you're just starting out, but you need to take on a kind of blaseness about what people think of you. And I'm not talking about in reference to the first step. I'm not saying that when you go through these tests and you feel embarrassed, you should not care. Not at all. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you should let people think that you're a cold and hard motherfucker because of these boundaries that you're setting, where you say, no, I'm not willing to show up in an environment where I might be misconstrued. You know, this kind of behavior might be, people might project onto you that it is selfish or that it is like prissy is the word I'm thinking of, or like posh. You know, I'm thinking of like a rich person on an airplane being unhappy with everything. You might feel like you're being like that, but you need to understand that this is about you, and it's more important how you feel about how you show up. And if that requires you to have very specific grounds for showing up, then that's okay. You know, like Ariana Grande always requested, well, so I've heard, who knows if this is even true, but I heard that she requested that she only be photographed on one side of her body. And I get that. If that's what it takes for her to show up as Ariana Grande and for her to stay in coherence and stability, then why not? There's nothing wrong with that, especially if she's warning ahead of time that that is what the requirements and bounds of her work are. That's a really crude example, but do you feel what I mean? So setting these standards for yourself that might initially make you feel a little bit, well, they won't make you feel embarrassed because they're going to be true. You're being true to yourself when you say, I feel uncomfortable when I'm treated outside of these particular ways that I'm suggesting. And that is a really deep type of discernment that you're going to discover in this process, where would you rather be taken advantage of and embarrassed and show up as something completely different to who you want to be and who you really know you are on the inside? Or would you rather be seen as a princess with high standards and selective and certain people who don't like that? I mean, that is the way to prevent them from coming into your reality. Those are the exact people that you don't want in your world. So I believe there's no problem with showing up the way that you want to show up and curating that to some degree. Because it's like training wheels. It's like the bumpers when you're going bowling. There's the only person who can really criticize that is you. And if you know why you're putting these measures up, and you know that they're there to stabilize you so that you can get some practice in being your full self and your full signal in front of others, then there really is no problem with it. So this brings us to number 4, which Spirit is calling experience. And that is basically an encouragement to tell you that you are not doomed to experience this forever. Even though the moments where you are tested and you feel like you're all the way back to square one and you're uncertain and you're presenting weakness and you're incoherent and it seems like you have no idea how to represent or advocate for yourself, know that you're in a process and this is coming up for a reason. It wants to be cleaned out, and it could be so much worse, you know. If you're preparing for bigger and better things, bigger audiences, holding stronger fields and frequencies and signals, then it needs to be tested in some kind of way. And you must know that the tests you're currently experiencing, there could be worse ones if you were on a bigger stage in a bigger field. And that's what you're ultimately preparing for. So see this all as fortifying experience, and know, like, if you're listening to this, you're a person who moves fast, you improve quickly, you're never going to make the same mistake twice. And if you are beating yourself up over something, you're going to get your shit together very quickly. And this is a completely necessary step, as much as you don't want to experience it. An example that's coming to mind is I used to do stand-up comedy, and as I was getting into it, I started to realize this unfortunate truth about the art form, and that is that you can rehearse a joke infinity times. I mean, infinity times. You can know every affectation and facial expression from the bottom of your soul with your eyes closed back to front. But that has absolutely nothing on getting up on stage and presenting it to an audience. You have no idea how that particular crowd in that particular venue that night is going to react to the joke. And you cannot finish a joke until you've had that experience. A joke is never going to be ready until it's been tested on an audience. And that is such a fucked part of the whole experience, because you don't want to experience that shame and that doubt and that heat of being seen. But you have to do, like, it's just like walking through the fire. It's the only way to get out of the burning building. So you must go through this painful stage, and the best thing you can do is swap your awareness and your perception of it from being this like deeply harrowing, shameful thing to being an inevitable part of the growth journey. And that's something some people never reach or touch in their whole lives. So it's very special that you've gotten to this place where you are willing to risk being seen certain ways in order to improve your experience in life. So that feels to be where Spirit wants to leave this message. I reckon this reading, listen to it twice. You know, there's a lot in here. There's so much depth and nuance. And just stop beating yourself up. Like, this phase is going to pass and it's really good for you. So I hope you're well. I hope you enjoyed this reading. Please like and subscribe, share, comment, be brave, and I'll see you in the next reading.